You may have heard of the Mozart effect, the tenuous idea that exposure to the music of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart has the ability to improve brain development and even IQ. But did you know that there is also a connection between Mozart and suicide prevention? This is Speak the Unspeakable, a series focused on suicide prevention through the lens of lived experience. My name is Scott Teichmer. I'm a suicide preventionist and a suicide attempt survivor. So what is Mozart's connection to suicide prevention? It's actually called the Papageno Effect. But before we explore the Papageno Effect, we must first go back a bit further to a different Wolfgang and start with something called the Werther Effect. So in 1774, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe published The Sorrows of Young Werther, a novel that tells the story of an unhappy romantic infatuation that ends in Werther's suicide. The book became incredibly popular, but was eventually banned in multiple countries with concern that the book's depiction of Werther's suicide had led to an increase in suicide deaths and even copycat suicides. To what extent the book was a contributing factor for suicide during that time period, we will probably never know. But research has indicated that how media portrays and reports on suicide can lead to increases in suicidal behavior. This harmful effect is known as the Werther Effect. So, while various forms of media can pose a risk factor for suicide, more recent research has looked into the question of whether or not certain types of media might actually have a protective effect against suicide. Enter Mozart and the Papageno Effect. Now, Papageno is a character in Mozart's opera The Magic Flute, which premiered in 1791. In one scene, Papageno fears that he has lost his love, Papagena, and decides to end his life. But he is reminded by three spirits of an alternative involving the use of his magic bells. At the last moment, Papageno chooses to live. Multiple studies have now demonstrated that media portraying personal experiences of overcoming suicidal thoughts by use of positive coping strategies and help-seeking behaviors can have a protective effect against suicide. Now, this protective effect has been dubbed the Papageno Effect. One study has even shown that for individuals who have had suicidal ideation or made a suicide attempt in the past year, reading a personal report from someone who has already overcome a similar crisis led to a decrease in suicidal ideation. Why is this so important? By following safe messaging guidelines and best practices for reporting on suicide, and by sharing stories of coping and of survival amidst crisis, we can not only reduce media exposure that could potentially be harmful, but we can also increase protective factors for those of us who may be at heightened risk for suicide. And we don't even need magic bells or a magic flute to do it. I would highly recommend that you take a look at guidelines on safe messaging and on safe reporting. One great resource that can be found online is reportingonsuicide.org. That's reportingonsuicide, no spaces.org. While most of us probably aren't journalists or news editors, many of us frequently do share articles and stories on social media. As such, it is all of our responsibility to ensure that we are not sharing articles that might have harmful unintended consequences for others, just as it is our personal responsibility to be mindful of our own media consumption and how it can have positive or negative effects. For those of you out there like me that have experienced suicidal thoughts in the past, let's be the Papagenos of the world. Let's speak the unspeakable together.
Bist du mir nun ganz ergeben?
Bin ich dir ganz ergeben?
Nun so sei mein liebes Weibchen,
So sei mein Herzensweibchen,
mein liebes Weibchen, mein Herz